So I read a newspaper story last week that traced decades of study about what makes humans happy. And because it's decades, you've heard it, it's not surprising what most of it was. It's married people are happier than people who aren't, committed relationships, people have social groups. But this writer wanted to go deeper. And as she did, she found that just being married doesn't make you happy. It's people that work as partners, as teams, kind of like the governor of Ohio and his wife. And it found that text communications between people really don't make them happier. It's face-to-face communication. But the reason I bring it up is it had a nugget that I thought was fascinating. And it was that people who strike up conversations with strangers on a bus, in a checkout line, get a lift, that it leads to happiness. And it's all about social interaction, face-to-face communication. We all know each other through text messages, and according to this story, that doesn't make us happy. So we're here tonight for face-to-face communication, to have a conversation with you, mostly thank you. Mostly, we're here to listen, though, because we do a lot of talking on powerful platforms. This is your chance to use those platforms to amplify your thoughts and, more importantly, your questions. So welcome to the town hall of cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. We're really glad you're here. Before I introduce our moderator, there are two things that I'd like to say. One is, pretty much everybody in here regularly visits with one of our platforms, and one of the special things about news organizations is because they're in your homes, you think of them like family. And with family, you're more likely to say things you don't say to strangers. You won't tell a stranger on the street, hey, get a haircut, but you'll tell your son, get a haircut. You have thoughts about our platforms. I guarantee you I won't get out of here tonight without somebody telling me, put Mary Worth back in the print edition. Yeah, good. And Judge Parker, I got Judge Parker too. And that's fine, but please don't use this forum for that. We have the room beyond the time for this, and many of us will be around to talk about that. Love to hear it, your thoughts on what we do. We're grateful for all the feedback we get. The second thing is, please smile. You're on camera. Let's show everybody who's watching that Midwestern courtesy. You might be mad as hell at what's going on right now in our country, but you're going to get a lot more mileage out of saying it with some mirth rather than with anger. So, Laura Johnston is our content director at cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. She likens herself to an air traffic controller, but I don't think that comes close to what she does. She is focused and dedicated and organized, and she does it all with good graces. I don't think I've ever seen her be angry. Her job didn't exist 5 years ago. I was trying to do all this myself, and I was not doing it well. And as I've advanced in years, I've come to realize that you can't do my job unless you have somebody who is excellent in Laura's role. She has been just a wonderful partner. I'll be grateful forever that she's taken on this job. If you are a fan of cleveland.com or the Plain Dealer, you're a fan of Laura Johnston. She and the rest of the people you see around here are the future of Cleveland news, and it's a bright one. Laura Johnston.
All I can say is Chris has never heard my kids talk about when I'm angry. Also, if people who talk to strangers in the grocery store are the happiest people in the world, then my mother is definitely right up there. So like Chris said, I'm Laura Johnston. I'm the content director at cleveland.com. But tonight is not about me or Chris or even the folks on this panel. It is about you and what you want to talk about from the beginning of President Trump's term. So thank you so much to the Cuyahoga County Public Library for hosting us here at the Parma Snow Branch. This is a lovely auditorium named for Sari Feldman. We are so glad to be here. Just about all of our editing staff is here, which is so exciting. We're going to be addressing 5 topics tonight, so please hang on to your question until we get to the subject area that it best fits. We have cleveland.com reporters who are the subject matter experts. They're going to address your questions. We won't know the answer to every question, but that's okay because it'll be used to focus our reporting in the future. So editor Chris Quinn and impact editor Layla Tassi are both here. They're going to hold the microphones and they're going to be in the center of the audience. So if you have a question for that topic, please line up behind them. They'll hold those mics. Also, we will take questions if we have time from the outside world, from the audience who's watching online. And Courtney Ostolfi, our trends editor, is here. She's going to be handling those. And so you can comment on Twitter, on Facebook, or email her at castolfi@cleveland.com. Now I've got to spell this because I didn't write it out. CALSTOFI@cleveland.com. I said that right? No! This is why I need to write it out. I'll tell you this. Okay. Okay, CASTOLFI@cleveland.com. I must have transposed things. Okay, so we're going to start with federal budget cuts. Those include cuts to the National Institute of Health grants, as well as cuts to national parks, food banks, and more. So we have Washington, D.C. reporter Sabrina Eaton here. You want to wave, Sabrina? All right. And health reporter Julie Washington. They're going to take most of those questions. Also, Laura Hancock is our education reporter. She's based out of Columbus. Some of those affect there. We're going to have education as its own topic, though. But we will spend the most time on this topic since it is wide-ranging. Then we're going to turn to tariffs and international relations. Sabrina is the expert here. I can help out about any questions about Canada, because that is where I am from. Immigration is next. Our federal courts reporter Adam Faris is going to take those questions. Then Social Security, which I have been told is of special interest to this crowd from the subtext subscribers. So Bob Higgs has been working on a lot of those stories. Here's Bob. And finally, education, like I said, including the Federal Department of Education, student visas, and higher education. And Laura will take those. Again, though, this forum's about you. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to know, and we'll use that not only to answer your questions tonight, but to go forward in our reporting. So please speak up. If you have a question off the bat, go ahead and line up, because we are just going to go straight away to this. But I do want to say that as of the beginning of this month, Trump has signed more than 140 executive orders. We cannot cover all of those here tonight, though we are figuring out a way to get those on our platform. But those policies have huge ramifications for all of us in our way of life. So I guess maybe I'll just kick off one question and then give people a chance to ask theirs. Sabrina, you wrote about the cuts to federal buildings, and that includes the plan to sell the 1.2 million square foot Anthony Celebrezzi Federal Building downtown. If you are downtown at all, you know where this is. It's huge. It's right at the corner of East 9th, right overlooking the lake. And that's going to displace about 4,000 federal employees. So can you explain the thought behind that and what that's going to do?
Well, I think the thought is, generally speaking, the Trump administration wants to cut expenses. And that is a fairly old building, and it needs a lot of repairs. So I think that their rationale there was that it will actually work out cheaper in the long run to sell the building to someone, leave someone else the bill for fixing it up, and then leasing space for the many federal employees who are in there. There's about 4,000 federal workers. DFAS is there. I think there's Social Security. I think there's some Veterans Administration people. So I think the idea is that by dispersing these people into lease space, the federal government will end up saving money. And I think that's the thought behind it. Now, I think a lot of people who work there feel that it could be just a way to try to, cut their jobs. Like, oh, we don't have real estate for you, so bye-bye. We can consolidate. Some years ago, for example, the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, there was talk of getting rid of that Cleveland office and, sending those jobs elsewhere, I think to Indianapolis. I think that there's a lot of worries by the federal workers there that will happen. And I know that the Democrats, Chantel Brown is very upset about that and is trying to fight it. The Republicans who represent Northeast Ohio are less on the rampage about that than her. I think that they I think there's some sense that they don't want to cross the Trump administration, because if you're a Republican and Trump gets the feeling that you're not up behind him 150%, you'll get a primary opponent. So
We have our first speaker, Laura.
All right.
Hi, I'm Pat Blahoviak, and I'm a retired family physician with currently a very small role in local government. But I'm very concerned with all the things that have been canceled relating to health. The meeting that was supposed to plan what was going into the flu shots next year was canceled. All the information about bird flu is not being posted. I don't know who has heard that there's tuberculosis now in Ohio, in addition to the people who are dying of measles and other preventative.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't forget the measles outbreak.
Yeah,
It's
so the
about 4 or
question is,
5
what are we
counties.
going to do? What are we going to do now? I mean, how on earth are people going to find things out? There are all these little things, I get an email here and an email list there, but what are your thoughts on how we're going to survive health-wise with all this stuff being canceled?
Well, first of all, hi, I'm Julie Washington, and I'm the healthcare reporter at the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. And thank you so much for that question. We're going to keep an eye on this. We're going to keep writing about it. But I have to say that I don't give personal opinions, because I'm kind of old school as a reporter, and I feel like that's not my place. But, of course, we will keep an eye on this. And you're right, it seems like every day there's something else coming out saying that this is being cut, that's being cut. Pages on the CDC website, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, not being there. And then, poof, they're back. And it's just a very unsettling situation. So we just have to keep our eye on it. If you want to talk to me later, or email me, I can tell you about some of the national newsletters that I keep up with that are doing an excellent job of keeping track of what's happening in Washington. And I do have some notes from stories I've written. Do we want to get into that?
Sure. I mean, you did talk about the CDC cuts to local health departments, which a lot of this information gets filtered through. So, I mean, millions of dollars are not going to those departments that are used to address health disparities, promote vaccination, and educate the public about those same infectious diseases we were talking about. Do you know off the cuff how many millions we were talking about there?
Well, in one story that I wrote, it said that the CDC recently pulled back $11.4 billion, that's with a B, in funds allocated in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I mean, we all think that the pandemic is over. Actually, it will never be over. It's now endemic. It's here to stay. That's what the researchers are saying. But the local health departments are still doing education. There have been, I think, some TV ads that, came down nationally. And they're still giving vaccines. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. So when that money's not there, that means that they can't do that work. So of the $11.4 billion that the CDC had for this, about $9.8 million of that came to Cuyahoga County in 2022 and 2023. And it was used for research, surveillance. Surveillance is just a fancy word for seeing how much of the disease is out in the community and what it's doing, whether it's going up or down. Education and vaccines. And these are all programs aimed at reducing disparities, because, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic really showed us how many disparities there were in our healthcare system. Who got the vaccine, who didn't, who got educated, who didn't. And they're still working on that kind of thing. And improving health equity, which, of course, goes along with disparities. And at the time, we said that local health departments are bracing for possible layoffs, higher expenses, and reduce community services. But the thing about this whole situation is that, the Trump administration will announce something and everyone gets nervous, and then it doesn't happen, or it's changed, or something else happens. And it's just so fluid. It's just really, really hard to keep up with what's going on. But this is what we knew as of about a month ago. So keep reading cleveland.com to find out what's going to happen.
But we are here to collect your questions, and so we will take this question further and try and get straight answers to it.
Layla's got quite a crowd over there.
My name is Ken Messenger-Rapport, and I have a fairly technical question. The President doesn't actually have the authority to impound funds, and the Government Accounting Office is responsible to report to Congress to indicate which funds are being impounded improperly, and there's a timeline on this. And it appears that as of February they were looking into it, but I haven't heard anything about this lately. So that's the first part of my question. The second part is, how do you get through to the representatives who are ultimately responsible to respond to the Government Accounting Office, to the GAO, and make sure that the tax dollars that we are paying to the government are being used as we have authorized them to be used?
That's one reason we are having a town hall, is because there's been a lack of them for some of the Republican representatives. You can still email and call your representatives, but I'm going to let Sabrina take this question.
Well, the way federal funding works, and that was a great question, and is that Congress actually sets the federal budget, and Congress is supposed to direct where the money goes. And the executive branch is supposed to do what Congress says, because they pass these spending bills that direct the money. I mean, they have some, there is some, they do have some discretion on how to do it, but a lot of the administration's decisions to stop funding things that were approved by Congress are being challenged, I believe, in court. And I think that what the Trump administration seems that they are doing is doing what they want and just seeing if the courts will uphold it or not. And so it will be up to the courts. And I think that a lot of members of Congress, like the Democrats, are all very vocal about it. I think that some of the Republicans are not happy about it either. But again, they can't really speak out because Trump is in charge of their party. And those who speak out, there are penalties for them. So I guess that does that answer it?
Chris, do you have a question over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Lisa Siosia. I'm a former teacher in the South Lyndhurst school system. And I don't know if I can ask this or not. I think you might have said we shouldn't, but the one thing I want to say is that I've been to several town halls, and the most impactful information that I've received is personal accounts by people who have been either already affected or will be affected by the cuts that the government is implementing. So I would love to see that kind of thing in the plain dealer, where people are profiled or highlighted in this way. But the other thing, the question I wanted to ask is, what will the impact, as a former teacher, what will the impact of the cuts today to mental health support for the public schools, which to me is just, I can't even believe it. What effect do you think that this will have on our communities specifically?
Yeah, well, I haven't heard or seen anything specifically about mental health, but certainly if there's less money going to local health departments, federally funded health centers, obviously that's going to affect mental health programming too. Just when you think about it, the county has been trying to put more money into mental health, like Metro Health building the hospital, the mental health hospital in Cleveland Heights, and other things that have been happening in mental health. But I haven't heard anything specifically about it. But if I could just talk to your previous point about getting stories from real people, we all love to get stories from real people. I mean, that's, there's nothing that I like more. However, it's really hard to find people who are willing to go on the record. You've got to, for a story like that, we would probably not let someone be anonymous, or I'd have to ask my editors.
No, we would.
If we would.
Be anonymous.
All right. Well,
it goes through Chris ultimately. But
okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But people they're terrified. Okay, that even if they're anonymous, someone will figure out who it is. They're told by their jobs not to talk. They're not allowed to talk, okay? We usually go through the public relations department, you know, of a hospital or whatever. It's just not that easy to find people.
If you're watching this and you want to share your story, I want you guys to reach out and share with us.
Yes, please do.
You can email us news@cleveland.com. You can email me, ljohnston@cleveland.com. If you have been affected by cuts and you want to share your story, anonymously or not, like, we do want to hear it because we want to know how Ohioans and everyone are being affected by these cuts. I'm going to throw it to Laura because she covers education.
I'm Laura Hancock. I am a reporter in Columbus, and I know of at least $50 million in grants from the federal government to the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services that have been cut. When I asked the department, like, how can you not have layoffs when you have such big cuts, they didn't really answer. I know that a lot of these grants are redistributed to locals, so maybe that's where potential cuts could be. The federal government funds 24% of Ohio's state budget. So these cuts are going to mean job losses. I mean, I don't see how they won't. Governor DeWine is a fellow Republican, as Trump is, and so he's not coming out against this, and his administration, his advisors, his department heads, they're also not coming out, saying, oh, this is horrible, all these cuts. They're very careful, but I think that, yes, these mental health cuts, I mean, there's no way when you cut, a portion of 24% of the state budget that local programs aren't going to be shrunk.
Well, and Mike DeWine, you just mentioned, who has been a proponent of expanding mental health services in Ohio, was at the announcement at the White House of cutting the Department of Education, and he's applauding that. So, Layla, you've got some folks.
Hi, my name is Joanne Hilden, and back to the health issues. I'm a retired pediatric cancer doctor, and we are all here because our representatives are silent. And I was trying to... and or hiding, So my question is to Mr. Husted and to Mr. Marino in the context of what is on Max Miller's website. Go there, and it has a picture of him and his happy statement about being a new parent. And I don't have my paper, I wrote it down, but his quote was, we are so reminded as we celebrate this child of the responsibility to create a brighter future for them, end quote. So my daughter-in-law is a teacher, and she's teaching in that cesspool that is now there because of the measles outbreak. And she had to tell the mom of a kid who had a heart transplant that she can't go to school anymore because they can't get the measles vaccine, they're immune compromised. Same with my sister who had a kidney transplant. She's out there terrified. So those are real stories about what's going on. And I want to know what they think about that, because their kids are going to grow, and their grandkids are growing up in this. Last point, all that NIH cutting, that's a lot of grants to current scientists and training scientists. And I know of one who shut their lab. Parents of kids with a brain tumor sent their kids specimens, signed the consent form. Yes, you can have this as they test what might kill it. Gone. Because no more money to run your lab, to train the people, gone. Mr. Husted, Mr. Marino, Mr. Miller, what do you think of that?
And, well, Mr. Marino, Mr. Husted, and Mr. Miller are not here tonight, but I'm going to let Laura... I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm going to let Laura answer that question because she just wrote about the NIH cuts and actually detailed, it was on Sunday on cleveland.com, millions and millions of, hundreds of millions of dollars in Ohio of projects that are going to be just canceled at universities and hospitals and the State Department of Health.
Yeah, we're talking $321 million at least, and it most likely is over that because there's a lot of research where, research is collaborative. So there might be another university that's technically the lead on the program and they got the grant and they'll redistribute it to someone in Ohio. So yeah, I mean, I talked to two professors at Case, and one does research on a certain gene. She got money to do research on a certain gene that can cause kidney disease. And so she was testing how lead and cadmium affect the gene and whether it leads to kidney disease in African Americans. African Americans get kidney disease at a higher rate than the rest of the population. And because she got a letter saying because this doesn't align with the administration and the National Institutes of Health goals, that this research was illegal and it was discriminatory. Even though today, if you apply for a grant with NIH and you are not going to include women in your study, you have to provide a valid scientific reason why. So we do know, studying subgroups is beneficial. Both scientists I talked to at Case talked a lot about the worries about usually postdoctorate fellows are the first people to get laid off in a lab. And so if there's less money, those are the people who are going to go, because often professors have tenure, and if they have multiple grants running through a lab, they can kind of keep going. And they're worried that people who are interested in science are instead going to swing over and maybe major in engineering or something because they're seeing the research grants dry up, and that could be a loss of a generation of scientists.
Chris, do you have a question up there?
Hi, so my name is Eliza. I just turned 18 in March and I voted for the first time yesterday, so I'm pretty Next year, I'm going to Kent State University and I'm majoring in global health. And I wanted to know, with the United States leaving the World Health Organization and cutting billions in funding to public and global health care, especially in major research-based colleges like the University of Pittsburgh and Case, what long-term effects will we be seeing when it comes to health care? Do you think basic medicine will be less funded in order to fund more important projects? Or what should we expect to see? I mean, going into public health, this is really scary for me, especially like you said. I don't want to be losing out on a generation of scientists like myself. So, can I take this?
Go for it.
A lot of companies started based on government-funded research. In fact, maybe some of you guys work for one of those types of companies. So if our government-funded research pipeline dries up, that is going to be less innovation, less jobs, less money being pumped into the economy. That's kind of the bottom line. The United States has a globally, a program and a system that's people are envious of across the world because it does such a good job funding health and research. And when I was going through grants, I was just shocked, University of Dakar in Senegal and the World Health Organization. I mean, the United States, for its flaws, does a lot of good in the world with the money that they send out in research. So if the pipeline dries up, there's no private foundation or no other world government that can step up. So it will be a loss.
I think in your story you mentioned that for every dollar the government spends, the return is about $2.56 in return, which is mind-boggling. Layla.
I believe this next question might not fit squarely in any of our buckets, but I suspect someone will be able to answer it.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Mary Huck, and I was a teacher. I'm asking a question. It might be adult education, it might be coverage, news coverage. The sky is falling. Our government is saying don't talk about it. Don't refer to climate change. It could alert people to make definitive changes in their consumption and their spending and affect the oligarchs' power acquisition. In 2024, the fire department had to use boats to rescue people stranded at the I-90-71 interchange near me. I feel like Chicken Little shouting the sky is falling in the childhood story, but no one is listening. Last winter, there was a snowstorm so bad that on my way to my youngest son's house in Hiram, Ohio, I could not see more than 10 feet in front of me. I wasn't even able to pull to the side of the road, and as I couldn't see that far. I thought I'd wind up in the cemetery I was driving past. The sky is falling. The summer version of that storm hit me 2 days ago, last Monday, near Akron on I-71, following a warning from the National Weather Service. My car was hit with falling sky, buckets of water, a curtain so solid I couldn't see even 20 feet in front of me. I had to follow a truck with flashing lights. The climate is the most urgent topic. Could cleveland.com please print more climate and weather events which make up the climate? And thank you for your previous coverage. And I know, Laura Hancock, thank you for being at Monday's Oil and Gas Land Management Commission meeting. Please continue to cover fracking our state parks, which is what I'm involved with, Save Ohio Parks, where we have given Governor Mike DeWine a moratorium on fracking our state parks from a coalition of more than 30 environmental organizations in Ohio. And thank you for covering the HB 15 energy bill the Ohio Congress has passed, which gives a green light to AI centers to fast-track building their own gas plants without allowing time for public input and allowing them to build them smack in the middle of residential neighborhoods. Could you let me know who to tag on cleveland.com on social media with published information?
Well, we do have a social team here, and you can always tag at cleveland.com. We will see it. We do have a new weather reporter. He just started. His name is Ryan Kohick. So we will be covering the weather even more in depth than we have been in the past. And Pete Krause is also here tonight. If you want to talk environment, I bet you Pete wants to talk to you. We have had several stories about, there have been federal cuts, obviously, on environment issues, stuff like solar projects and millions of dollars of projects that were in jeopardy, like other things that we've talked about before. It gets canceled, it gets taken back. I don't know, Sabrina, if you know the latest on any of the environmental cuts for the solar projects or anything else in Northeast Ohio. I mean, it's something we continue to follow.
Can you hear me? Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. I think that there are particular topics that the Trump administration regards as things that they want to get rid of. And they are things like DEI, like anything that they regard as potentially diversity, equity, and inclusion is that. Also anything that is Green New Deal. And that is, you know, those are all of the things that are aimed at counteracting climate change, which some of these folks don't actually think is happening, despite some of the scientific evidence. So those are particular targets for things that they want to cut. Now on the solar grants, I think that these grants were for big solar farms, you know, putting out like lots of panels to generate electricity. And the Trump administration really wants to revive coal, which people, you know, it's one of the more polluting sources of power. But there was a lot of it in Ohio, and Ohio coal interests gave a lot of money to Republicans. And I don't know if you remember over the years, but all of the Republican presidential candidates would have rallies down in southern Ohio by the coal mines with all these guys with with the hard hats and things like that. And so that is the priority of the administration. They regard like solar as not as like they don't think that you get the bang for the buck for it. And they're also very interested in boosting the amount of power that we have now because of AI and the amount of energy that uses. And blockchain, the crypto people who are from the crypto companies funded Republicans to a great extent. For instance, in the Sherrod Brown-Bernie Moreno race, there was a lot of crypto money went in there. So I don't think that we're going to be seeing a lot of money directed toward energy efficiency projects during the next 4 years. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I think I read
Julie.
today that they're getting rid of the Energy Star rating on the appliances. Do I have that right? Yeah.
Julie.
Oh, wow.
Houston,
And
I
then
believe, sponsored that, right? He was really proud of it. He put out a press release.
Laura,
Yeah, it's been around
we're
for a
having
long
a
time.
technical issue, so we need to turn the microphones off except for the person who's speaking.
Okay, if you're not speaking, turn off your mic.
Okay, can I ask Sabrina a question?
You can share a mic.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wondered, how realistic is it that coal will come back?
Well, you're asking me to make I just think that getting all of that back up and running is, it's kind of a tall order, but I think so the coal companies want to do it for sure.
Okay, we are going to move on to tariffs and international relations. That's the next part of our program. So if you have questions about tariffs, international relations, Layla and Chris are ready for your questions. Do we have one more that we really want to get in, Chris?
We have an education question. Is education...
Education is one of our topics. We're going to have a whole 15 minutes on that. Do you want to go to that next?
Sure, let's go to education.
Let's do education.
Thank you, I appreciate that. First, I wanted to say thank you for holding this forum. I think it's really great that the public is here. And my question is on education. My school district just recently signed on to the vouchers for Ohio, which I'm very, very happy about. So I was wondering if the panel or the education person could talk more about that for those if you don't know what it is, and also could you give a status of the lawsuit or follow it and try to see what's going on with that. There are many, many school districts that have signed on to that. So maybe speak to that.
The vouchers for an Ohio lawsuit. Yes, the state asked the judge in Columbus, Jiza Page, she's a Democrat, they asked her to do a hearing to dismiss. And so she had a 3-day hearing, and that was last week, and she will come out with a decision. She is very deliberative, and she is very cautious. She's very deliberative. So she'll come out with a ruling on whether there's enough to dismiss the entire case. The people who are on the side of the plaintiffs, the people suing over vouchers, are saying that this is more just kind of a pro forma, this is a process thing. They're not too concerned that the actual lawsuit will get dismissed. So assuming that she does not dismiss a lawsuit, we're looking at trial this fall possibly, but it's already been delayed, so we'll see. But that's where they're at so far.
Can we follow that? Can cleveland.com and Plain Dealer follow that, please?
Absolutely.
We will continue to follow that story, 100%.
Chris, I was going to bring
I think at this point, let's let the people decide what the topic is, right? Because they're lined up.
Okay. I want to say, when we're talking about DEI, I love it that so many women are speaking out. Women have power. And I'm a retired sociology instructor. And so I do a lot of watching, read a lot of information about that. And it's pretty well known that quite often men talk over women or ignore women. I know, that's never happened to you, right? And I can relate, by the way, because I'm from Minnesota, and Minnesota nice rains. Anyway, what I really want to talk about are some of our health care programs like Medicare and Medicaid. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I have to have insulin to live. And it's a very expensive disease to have, but I get a lot of help from Medicare. I have an insulin pump, I have a continuous glucose monitor, and all those things I count on to survive. And I'm wondering what's going to happen to the benefit that I receive from Medicare. I have family members also that are on Medicaid, and that seems to be a really scary place to be right now. They are disabled, they cannot work, and yet it sounds like that program, it might get yanked away too, or at least a great part of it. So on behalf of people that are living with these kind of diseases and many others, I want to know what's happening to Medicare.
I love the questions that ask us to predict the future, because I would love to be able to do that. We do know that a lot of the Medicare decision comes up down to the state and what the federal government decides to do and what DeWine decides to do that too. Julie, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, that's one of the things, of course, we'll be looking at. And I think at both the federal and the state level, those budgets are still up in the air. They haven't been decided yet, so it's another one that we have to watch. But I did, for tonight, I did see an update that came out on May 5th, where Trump has released his 2026 proposed budget, and it proposes that $674 million would be cut from Medicare and Medicaid program. Yeah.
The thing with those presidentially proposed budgets, though, is it's up to Congress to pass the budget. And so presidents always throw these things out there. And Trump in particular has, for example, with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, during his first administration, he wanted to either zero it out or have cut 90% of it, and Congress would always restore it. So, that shows you where the Trump administration is coming from. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Chris, you got another question up there?
Yes, hi. Listening to people, I miss a little bit, but in general, I want to follow what the neighbor was saying about the sky is falling. This is fascism that we are dealing with here. And it's no joke. It is children. It matters not whether he was voted in, Hitler was voted in. We cannot allow this to go on. We cannot allow fascism to consolidate any further than what we already see has happened in only 100 days. So my question really to the panel, to the people in this room, to decent people all over the country, what are you doing? What will you do to stop Trump and this fascism in its tracks now before it gets consolidated? Please come and talk to me after. I work with a network, naturally, called refusefascism.org. And I'd love to speak to anyone who's interested. So,
this is something we talk about on our podcast a lot, Today in Ohio, which Chris hosts, and Layla Tassi, Lisa Garvin, and I are on, and we talk about similarities to Hitler and about the fascism in our country. I don't know that it's anything anybody on the stage wants to take on. Do you want to talk about fascism, Sabrina?
Well, what I'd just like to say is, our job is to write about what's going on, and, if you want to do something about it, that's your prerogative. So we're supposed to be journalists who just kind of present people with the facts. And, for example, I am not allowed to personally go to protests because it can show, a lack of objectivity on my part. So, I think you're asking us to assume a role as objective journalists that we really are not supposed to do.
I think the key is to use your voice, and you're using it tonight.
This is not just about rallying, that's important, but this needs to be penetrating all through society. What will writers write about? What will artists do? What will musicians do? Everywhere throughout society, it's not just a matter of, well, I'm not capable, but that's your job. Everyone has a role if you see the danger of this.
And our role is to give the information that Sabrina just wrote about, a story on Sunday about the cuts into AmeriCorps and what that means in Ohio. So we are trying to give everyone as much information as possible to let you know the effects of the government decisions and how it affects Ohio and how it affects the people here. And yes, you are here using your voice. That is incredible. Hats off to you. I hope everybody is using their voice and thinking deeply about what's happening in our country.
And we're here to amplify what people say.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to keep writing about it. Layla, you've got a question up there, right?
Well, my question is that I've been sitting here, and I think I represent the people that voted for Mr. Trump. I'll give you an example of why I voted for Mr. Trump. Okay, first of all, if Kamala Harris would have been elected, we would have seen an end to women's sports in America because of transgenders. We would have seen an end to women's sports in America. I'm sorry.
You're an idiot.
Okay, I'm sorry. That would have happened. Okay.
Do you have a...
Yeah, well, you know what? We're talking about fascism. That's what the communists love to do, is to call everyone a fascist.
What's your question?
My question is, you guys are really the plain dealer. Because people that voted for Trump, they don't like to read the plain dealer. Because
Okay, we're going to have a civil discussion, everyone. We're going to let him finish with a question.
well, I didn't hear a lot of questions. I heard an advocacy of Trump being a fascist. I heard a disparagement that we dropped out of the World Trade Center. Do you know, I have a question. Do you know who runs the World Trade Center? Do you know he was put there by the Chinese communists?
Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, do you know, he's not even a doctor. And he lied with the COVID.
How do you know all these
Okay,
things?
we're going to have a civil...
I have a claim
We're
to
going to let
fame.
him
I'm going to
finish
share it
the
with all
civil
of you.
conversation.
I have a claim to fame. I'm going to share it with all of you.
Oh boy, we're excited now.
Okay. Can I ask him a question?
Yeah, ask me a question.
No, we're not.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
We're going to let him finish. He's going to let him finish his question, and then we're going to answer the question.
My question is, everybody here seems to be really with the left, but the majority of Americans voted for Trump. How do you feel about
To be
that?
clear, Trump won the election, but not the majority of the vote. It wasn't over 50%. Just to be factual. Okay, Chris has got a question up there. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Bill Dozier. I'm a retired United States Marine, a Vietnam vet, 100% disabled due to my service in Vietnam. My wife is a United States Army retired nurse, 50% disabled due to her service. And we particularly appreciate the coverage in the Plain Dealer about the VA and the Veterans Administration. Trump, who has never been a true backer of the military, continues to try to make cuts. Although we have a fantastic service here in Cleveland, many places in this country, veterans are not getting the services they deserve. And it's very difficult in many places to get an appointment. Doug Collins, who now heads the VA, is trying to cut 80,000 positions, which is madness, from the VA at the direction of Trump. And like the doctor earlier, I'd like to know where Marino and Husted is at, so we can ask them how can they back these insane policies.
Okay, another question for Bernie Moreno and John Husted, but about the VA. Do you want to take on anything, Julie, about how the VA health has changed in under the last administration, or Sabrina?
That's really something I'm still looking into. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, that's something that I'm looking into. I know we do have a fantastic VA system here that's very large and very powerful, but we will be looking into the cuts and seeing how that's going to affect things nationally.
Okay, Chris, you have a question up there?
Excuse me, sir. If you're comfortable.
Thank you. My name is Anita Gray, and right now my heart hurts.
Nice to meet you.
My heart hurts because I don't feel like I know my country anymore. It is so sad what's happening. We have immigrants being deported without due process, a president that is grifting in his office. On the way over, I heard from CNN that the UAE, I believe, just invested $1 billion into his coin company, which will enrich him by more than $100 million. I thought that was against the law. I don't understand what's happening, and why don't we hear about it? It's mute, it's silent, it's crickets on all of the grift that's happening.
Is there a question that we can answer there?
Yes, my question is, why don't you write about the grift that's happening in office?
To be clear, we are the biggest news organization in Ohio, and we have one reporter in Washington. That's Sabrina Eaton, and she does a wonderful job of keeping us apprised on our representatives and the folks who represent Ohio. And we have a policy of really concentrating on Ohio here and the Ohio issues, because you may know, news is, this is an industry, we're not as big as we used to be. And while we just don't tend to cover the national news from our staff, and while it is very important, and we do run the stories on our website and our opinion pages, we can't be everywhere all the time. But I wholeheartedly understand what you're saying, and we'll make sure that we look at that and address it. And there's with 140 executive orders in the first couple of months, it is hard to cover everything equally. But I know where you're coming from, so thank you.
The question didn't mention immigration, so maybe Adam could speak to
immigration.
it. But we have another comment first.
Okay.
Well, my comment is to you, sir.
Oh.
Because I would suggest that next panel, we have a shrink up there for people like me.
I do love that. So Adam Paris is our federal courts reporter, and he wrote a wonderful story explaining how immigration courts work, because I learned so much from Adam's story that it is not a regular court. It's not federal court. Do you want to explain to folks how the immigration court works?
Sure. It's like Laura said, it's a civil administrative court with a judge that's appointed by the Justice Department, not elected or appointed by the president. So it was sort of fascinating. I spent a week just sitting in the mundane court hearings. Most of them are, but it's a fairly. It gives people a chance to. Explain whether they're if they go back to their home country, if they're going to be tortured or if they're going to be persecuted. Very difficult to prove that. I only saw one trial. The person was deported. They did not have any tangible evidence. You have to have sworn affidavits or copies of text messages, things like that. So yeah, I think just there is due process there. A lot of people on both sides, I think, have issues with it, and it's a very different from a criminal court where it's you and I can go on and look at a murder case in common pleas court and sort of see what's going on with it. Can't really do that in immigration court. But there is a process there, and a judge and appeals remedies if people disagree. So,
just to walk folks through this, there are jails, county jails in Northeast Ohio who take in people that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, bring into their jail. But we can't get the names of those folks, correct?
Yeah, that's true. I think right now there's, in Northeast Ohio, there's Mahoning County, NEOCC, which is a private jail. Portage has raised their hand, and Geauga's been doing it for a while. But yeah, we can't get those. There's a post 9/11 rule that if you contract with ICE to hold detainees, that you can't release that information to the public. There is a lawsuit that the ACLU filed that is challenging that. It's still going on, but that would apply here too if there was a change, or if the judge decides that that's the way it is, and that's the way it is for everywhere.
Okay, looks like we got a lineup again. Okay. Layla?
Hi, I'm a retired teacher from Bay Village, Ohio. I appreciate when you report on things that appear in the state budget without hearings and things that don't follow single subject rules. And I don't like the fact that our reps haven't had town meetings. I'm curious about what the ethics are for reporters with regard to what would, I guess, be the equivalent of an empty chair in a debate. So when you contact Moreno or Max Miller or Houston, who I'm just naming my reps, and they don't answer, do you routinely report, we try to get an answer, they don't answer? And I'm hoping you can do things to highlight that if you can, and also progress of like FOIA requests and things like that you do.
I can start with this. So generally, we always try to reach the representatives. Sometimes there's a real need to get the story out as quickly as possible and get the news out, and we'll just say we've reached out for comment, and then if they get back to us, we will add in that comment in the same story and we'll update it. Sometimes we're working on a longer piece and we give people more time to comment, but the general rule is we ask them for comment, we let you know we ask them for comment, and if they tell us they're not going to comment, we're going to put that in the story.
And the whole reason we're here tonight is because they haven't been available to comment, and we want your questions to put them on the hot seat. We'd love to know what subjects you would love them to have congressional hearings about with regard to Trump. We're here to elevate these kinds of questions, to put them in front of them and put the pressure on to get answers.
And just remember that a lot of these people have press secretaries, right? So you'll ask them a very pointed question about a specific thing, and you get a very bland statement back. And there's, as much as I would love to be able to grill them all about what we want to know, it's not always possible.
I'm going to ask another immigration question. You describe how difficult it is for folks to prove the danger in their country that they left if they're applied for asylum. And I know that depending on the administration, the rate at which those are approved varies a great deal by judge. Very difficult to do. At most, there are judges who approve half. It's usually far less than that. How can it be that in the fall of 24, there were folks who had their asylum applications approved by these judges, and then in January and February, the Justice Department appeals those. Those folks are no longer granted asylum, and then while waiting for the appeal of what they already won, they are being deported. How can this happen?
That's a great question. There are, in the court system, there's due process, and you typically follow the judge's order. But if there's some sort of appeal, I think that would probably typically be the person that is the subject of the case rather than the government. But if that's what they're doing, then that's a.
These are folks who have been granted asylum, and it's the Department of Justice, months and months later, is now saying we're appealing those that were approved. And while folks are on an appeal, they are being deported.
There's been a lot of national coverage of specific cases. I don't know of any in Ohio that we've covered, but we can definitely add that to the list of things we want to learn more about.
Yeah, I haven't seen that here, but again,
Bob wants to add something.
Yeah,
Somebody mentioned earlier that part of what it appears the administration is doing is acting first and seeing how far they can go before somebody stops them. This issue is one of those. You hear a lot of spin out there about people don't want us deporting criminals and murderers and the world's worst kind of people. And what the real debate right now is what Adam referred to, due process. And you have people who had those kind of statuses who were deported before they ever had a chance to go before a judge to say, wait a minute, I have legal status here. And then, as you're seeing with the guy from Maryland who's now in El Salvador, it's then hard to deal with. The goal was to get the people rounded up, get them out of the country, and now it's going to take time to go through the courts until somebody can actually make the administration follow what the courts say. In the meantime, they have taken people out of the United States, often without due process.
Thanks, Bob. Chris, you've got a line up there.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Max Miller did have
at the town hall, but it was a video, or not a video, but an audio, and I never saw any coverage of that in the PD. And I know we only have like one person or whatever, but can the Sun Post maybe cover that? Because it was very interesting that in the town hall, Max Miller came out for Ukraine staunchly for money to Ukraine, funding them, standing up to them, and crickets.
Actually, Pete Krause, who's here, actually wrote that story. We do have a problem with the town halls because they're very controlling of the comments. It's not open like this where people speak. Right. So, but we did, and he's here. We did write about what he said about Ukraine.
To be clear, Pete covered the one at the Strongsville Republican Club. If there was a different teletown hall, that's separate. But we did cover the in-person when Pete went to that, to Strongsville. And that's on cleveland.com. But I hear what you're saying.
Okay. My last little quick question is the Columbus State Senator, Jerry Serino, he used to have an actual person answering the phone. He no longer does. Can somebody ask him why that is?
Let me just write that down. Jerry Serino.
my favorite person.
We like to talk about him on our podcast, I'm sure he loves us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Layla.
Hi, I have a question about Elon Musk and all of his little bros stealing all of our data. I'm concerned about the long term. I mean, what are they doing with all of our data, and what's the long-term effect of this going to be? I mean, he may be gone, but is he taking all of our data with him, and who's he sharing it with, and where's it going, and what's going to happen?
I mean, he used the chainsaw. He got rid of it all. Sabrina.
I think that is really a question that a lot of people have. You know, what is going to happen to all that data? And I think a lot of people are concerned about it. And you know, it's not something that we have done a whole lot with as an outlet, because that's more of a national story. I mean, if we knew, for example, that someone in this audience had their data compromised and was really upset about it and was willing to talk to us on the record about it, you know, we could maybe localize it in that way. But I think that you're probably going to hear a lot more of that about that from the national media.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, thank you very much. I'd like to basically get back to the woman who was talking, part of the anti-fascism organization. And I do have a question, but she's a lot closer to the truth than I think anybody realizes. Fascism is generally defined as devotion to one person over a government or constitution. You find a minority to pick on and blame problems on. In our case, it's immigrants. You have ultra-nationalization. I mean, these are all things that are signs of fascism. My question is, and it's specifically for the reporter in the middle, and I apologize that I didn't catch your name earlier.
Sabrina.
Hi, Sabrina.
Hi.
You had talked about, well, we have to be objective, we just have to report what happens. But what do you do when you report on something that you know is obviously wrong? This is not a both sides issue. This is one side is wrong. One side is historically evil. How can you just say, we're just going to report the facts?
That's not on Sabrina, that's on me. And
I know she's not the only one who does.
Yeah, but that's policy.
So he sets the policy.
And I just wrote a column about this, that we are not doing what you're talking about. We pursue the truth. We're calling out when stuff is false. I wrote that the politicians have weaponized the long-standing journalism practices of asking each side, hey, what do you think, to spread hateful, incorrect messages, and we won't do it. So we are doing what you're talking about. We are trying to do that.
Another one there.
I have a question about media. How do you feel about this
this administration going after, I'm going to say, the mainstream media, in particular right now, it's PBS and NPR, but it was already ABC, CBS, Paramount. I mean, this has been a concern for me from the get-go with this administration. I think this is one of the most frightening things, that they want to control what the public hears and reads. And when you look at the media bias chart, in particular, PBS and NPR are pretty much right in the center. I mean, they are not leaning any way. It's just, they report the news honestly. And I wanted to just read something real quick. Public media is legally required to maintain editorial independence from government influence, any administration. And they rank consistently as one of the most trusted news sources across political affiliations. I think if they don't promote this president constantly, he doesn't like it. But you're the media too, and you could go after, he's going after the AP already. So I just wonder how you feel about that. Does it scare you a little? It scares me.
Obviously, the freedom of the press is one of the most sacred tenets of American democracy. And there is a culture of fear in this country right now that I think is growing. I mean, I let Chris take this as the leader of our organization, but I know that we, like you just said, we believe in speaking up for the truth. We don't want to be cowed. We have the podcast I talked about earlier. We have our opinion pages, and we choose what we write about, like AmeriCorps cuts and NIH cuts. And we're going to keep bringing you that news so you know what is happening in the government, even if they'd rather not tell everybody.
We're fortunate that we're part of Advance Local.
And so we don't answer to anybody. We're not going to be cowed. We've shown it. We're going to pursue the truth. I know everything you're saying is correct. For people that are vulnerable to areas that the Trump administration can nibble at, they're going to have trouble. NPR is going to have less money probably. But because of the group that we're a part of, we're very independent and we'll continue to do what's right. At least Northeast Ohio and Ohio will continue to have that voice.
We are financially stable, and we'll do this forever if we can, but I hope everybody is reading the news, and the more that you can arm yourself with information, the better off you are. So everybody should be reading cleveland.com.
I just wanted to say that, I've been doing this a very long time, more than 30 years, and having politicians wanting to crack down on the media and tell us what to do and not talk to us and try to boycott us. This is done by politicians of both parties. It's not like Trump invented this this playbook. So, as a reporter, when you're subjected to that, you just persevere. And if the person won't return your phone calls, you figure out where they're going to be, and you go up to them in person and you ask them the questions you want to ask. And if they blow you off, then you just say, wouldn't answer the questions, and that's how you handle it.
I've got to say, Sabrina took me around D.C. one day, and I was so impressed that she knew everybody in all of the congressional offices, and so she knows. She's a shoe leather reporter, and she will not take a silent phone for an answer.
Ken Messenger Rapport again. So nobody's asked a question about tariffs, and Trump is supposed to be this brilliant businessman, but in the Wall Street Journal this morning, there's an article about a logistics expert who deals specifically with small business people. And his point of view on this is that this is a catastrophic, self-inflicted economic disaster that is going to wipe out millions of small business individuals, business people, because they won't be able to get their products and they won't be able to pass on the cost to their customers. So I'm sure that there's a local angle on this. Could the plain dealer please cover that?
Yeah, I believe what Trump originally promised us campaign trail was, economic prosperity, and now they're saying you're going to have to buckle down for a period of roughness before we get to that great golden time in the sky. But we definitely have been writing about the tariffs. The tough thing with the tariffs is we wrote about them when they were announced, and then they got pulled back, and then they've been announced and they pulled back. So, Sabrina, do you want to say where we stand on the tariffs right now?
Well, some of the ones that have been announced, as Laura said, have been pulled back. But I think that we have the 10% across the board ones that are in there, that are in play. We also have, I believe, I think it's a more than 100% tariff on goods from China that is in effect. And I think a bunch of these tariffs that Trump has announced, he put a hold on. I think that part of the point part of the reason that President Trump wants to do this is that after trade agreements like NAFTA happened, a lot of towns that had a lot of manufacturing, those jobs ended up going to countries with lower wages like Mexico and China. And I think that his theory is that having these tariffs will encourage these businesses to bring back these factories. And our speaker talked about an article in the Wall Street Journal today. I think yesterday there was one that quoted, in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article quoting a guy from Cleveland named Jack Schron, who I believe had been a politician here, saying that that the tariffs made the goods made by his company, which is I think something called Juergens Inc., way more competitive, and that they're getting like contracts out the wazoo because of the tariffs. So I think that the way the tariffs have worked out, it just depends on what industry you're in. Like if you're raw materials, you're relying on them from China, or maybe from Canada. I think that there are some tariffs on some of the. I think there's still some tariffs on products from Canada. If it's going to make your raw material costs go up, it's going to be bad for those businesses. But other businesses, it's been good for. And Trump has said that we're getting billions of dollars in revenue from the tariffs. And, I guess we'll just sort of have to see if his vision plays out with the return of manufacturing.
Most economists are not rosy on that.
But to answer the question, we are covering tariffs every way we can about the local impact. We've got a bunch, we'll continue to do it.
Mm-hmm. Chris, you've got a crew up there.
Hi, I'm a local social worker. I've been a social worker in Cleveland and surrounding counties for over a decade. And I'm thinking, as we hear about all of these cuts and everything, how we as a community can come together to fund the places that are being defunded, and I'm wondering how the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com can partner with local nonprofits, because I don't know if everybody knows this, but Cleveland is a hub for the nonprofit community. That's also what my undergrad degree is in. And how can you as media partner with our booming nonprofit sector to close the gaps and make sure that our citizens are getting the services that they need?
That's a great question. I'm not sure who wants to take it. I think what's troubling is when we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts to a wide array of nonprofit agencies. That's going to be hard to make up locally. We do have 2 health and human service levies that we pass religiously, basically, in this county that goes to those kind of issues. But I think the idea of talking to nonprofits and letting us know how much they've been cut, those are the local stories that you want to read, that we want to tell people the effects. So I feel like repeating this, if anybody wants to talk to us, a small business owner, as a nonprofit, how they've been cut, what they're missing, where the money's going, email us and we will tell your story. Does anyone want to take on the nonprofit question? Okay. Something we will continue to report on. That's a great point. Layla.
See, if you want to ask your question quick, you come to this side of the auditorium. I'm going to ask a question I had to think about how to phrase this. It goes to the essence of accountability in office. The Supreme Court has ruled that there should have been some action taken on the immigration, and we know the issue of the man who was deported. And there seems to be some lack of response to that. It's pushed back, we don't hear it, we don't respond to it. And I guess my real question is, if you look at that in context, here in the state of Ohio, we had a redistricting issue where basically the redistricting was ruled unlawful, and the Supreme Court said so, and everybody sort of said, oh, okay. And nothing happened, and nobody said anything. I'm not sure how to ask my question other than how do we address something that isn't being answered?
Well, we did have a group that wanted to address the redistricting, and it was on the ballot in November, and Ohioans voted against it. So they spoke that they were okay, I guess, with the system. Also, Mike DeWine had promised to bring a new system forward.
That was pretty quick on the ballot.
That easy.
We haven't seen that yet, but does anyone want to take on the question about
I'm going to stop you before you take charge here. What I'm pressing at is that the Supreme Court of the state of Ohio said these actions were not legal. And while there may have been action taken later as the referendum, which has its whole set of issues, but there was a very specific statement, what you did was against the law. And it was never addressed, there was never any penalty, nobody ever paid anything for it. And it just seems that there's an accountability issue that isn't being followed.
I do think there's an accountability issue between the courts and how do the courts make the other branches of government, the checks and balances, how do they work? But Laura is our State House representative.
I wrote two. I was at a time covering the Ohio Supreme Court, and I was covering the race for Chief Justice. And I wrote two stories I remember about Sharon Kennedy, her opinions always being the minority opinions, upholding the maps that the majority had determined were, Republican illegal gerrymanders. And I had quoted people like, will this cause people to vote against her? And most people said no, and they were right, because she actually ended up winning Chief Justice.
Right, and now it's a Republican majority Supreme Court, and Maureen O'Connor, who was the Supreme Justice, led that referendum effort that failed.
The point is good, though. We've been talking about how Donald Trump is trying to defy the courts. We haven't tied it back to what happened in Ohio. We talked about that and wrote about that a lot, and it's a good parallel to analyze. So thanks for that question.
Hi again. As I said, I'm going to a public college in Ohio, and I know SB1 was recently passed. So I was wondering if you could explain everything that SB1 is going to do and how it's going to affect schooling in public universities. I know the basics, but I'd like if you could provide a little more details.
Laura Hancock, education reporter.
So Senate Bill 1 passed in March. Governor DeWine signed it, and it will become law at, I believe, like June 27-ish. The law makes diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is not defined, illegal. It requires universities to pass statements saying that they're open to all viewpoints. It's based on the premise that universities are liberal and that conservatives are discriminated against, and they often feel like they have to self-center. They're discriminated against for their grades, if they're students, they're discriminated against for tenure, if they're professors, that kind of thing. The word indoctrination, indoctrinate, is in the bill, and it says that professors cannot indoctrinate, employers cannot indoctrinate. It takes away faculty's right to strike. It limits the content that can be covered in a collective bargaining agreement, so workplace conditions cannot be negotiated. It limits academic collaboration with China. You can still do some research, but you have to go through the Ohio Department of Higher Education. It prohibits taking scholarships from private individuals for like affirmative action scholarship, for to try to get more people of color in a certain area that doesn't have a lot of, diversity. I don't even know if
It requires a class, a 3
Oh yeah, it
credit
requires an American history class, and the legislators created a list of documents that need to be read: the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, letter from Birmingham jail, a couple of the Federalist Papers, and some others, and and then there's all sorts of stuff about post-tenure review. Like if you don't like, what a professor is doing, you can call them up for post-tenure review, and they can be fired. It's like, and then it's a process, but generally they can be fired. If the universities, we have a problem in Ohio where we don't have, the number of students going to all the universities is shrinking. So if you want to eliminate a program, it allows you to eliminate the programs without consideration of tenure and seniority generally. There's so much to it. Right now, there is a group of professors at Youngstown State University who are trying to do a referendum to repeal it on the November 4 ballot. Where they are at right now is they have just started collecting 248,000 signatures. They have to get them from at least 44 of 88 counties. And they have to turn it in by, I believe, early July. And if they can do that, they can be on the ballot. But then the last part of it is, let's say they do it, and it's very expensive, and they don't have money for paid signature gatherers, which is often how you're successful. But even if they can pull that off, and usually you have to get twice as many, so they'd have to get around 500,000, because a lot of them are thrown out because, the person who signed doesn't live where their voter registration says they live, that kind of thing. And anyway, then the final stretch would be actually doing a campaign, because there will be a lot of people who want to keep this in the law. So they'll have to, somehow get money together to do a campaign, ads, social media, just all sorts of stuff to try to bring public awareness so people vote for it. So it is they admit fully it's a Hail Mary effort.
All right, we got 3 more questions. Laura, let's try and get them in.
All right. Thanks for doing this, please. Thank you very much. I'm a native Clevelander. The first foreign country I ever visited was Canada. And it was so thrilling to be a young person and to cross the border and to be in a foreign country. Do Canadians want us to come and visit?
Yes, because a lot of their economy depends on the United States. And so I couldn't give you the exact number of Americans that go to Canada every summer. I believe it's 20 million Canadians that come to the United States, and there's a lot of worry about them not coming because they're speaking with their dollars, and they don't want to go to, they're selling houses in Florida, and they're selling them in New York State and Ellicottville because they just don't feel welcome. Obviously, there's just a Canadian election where they elected Mark Carney. He actually, yesterday? He went and met with Trump, and the 51st state came up again. I was born in Sarnia, Ontario. I moved here when I was 4, and all of my relatives still live in Canada. I'm going this weekend. This will be the first time I've gone back since September. I have a Toronto Maple Leafs hat I think I might wear to camouflage myself. But yes, no, I think that people understand that not all Americans voted for Trump. Not everybody feels the same way. Canadians are some of the friendliest people you will ever meet, even if their motto right now is elbows up. So I mean, who doesn't love a Canadian, really? So I think if you're friendly to them, they would welcome you with open arms. That said, I don't expect lines at the border at Port Huron, Michigan this summer.
And so, as a corollary, what about the Europeans? Are they open to us traveling? England, France, Italy?
I haven't talked to anybody from there, but I would say everyone always welcomes tourism. As long as you're polite and you follow their laws, you're spending money in their country, you're building their economy. And at least with the Canadian dollar, it's not very strong compared to the American dollar, so American dollar buys a lot. So I would say if you're going to go spend money in a foreign country, they're not going to say no. Yeah, Sabrina.
I have a son who lives in the Netherlands, and I have a brother who lives in England, and they're not seeing a lot of hostility toward Americans. So there you go.
It's funny. I happen to be going to Europe on Sunday, and I bought myself a Canadian Republican, Canadian flag Republican, and Cleveland Republican. What I'm here to say and ask is, I've listened to a lot of the conversation about things that we are all lying awake at night worrying about, and I've listened to, the Youngstown group with trying to get the referendum on the ballot and all kinds of, suggestions along those lines. And I would just like to say that what is keeping me up at night is the SAVE Act and the Ohio versions of the SAVE Act, which is Senate Bill 153 and House Bill 233. And these bills are incredibly harmful and dangerous to our fundamental right to vote. And everybody knows that, a healthy democracy is a place where people can vote easily and where the electorate is broad. And it seems that our representatives are trying to make it harder and harder and harder. Many of us know that the SAVE Act and the Ohio versions would require proof of citizenship anytime somebody registers to vote or changes their address. This disenfranchises thousands of people in our state, most of the poor, the young, and married women, by the way. So we know all that part, and that's bad enough. There are many, many things in this act that are almost weaponizing voting against the voter, such as if you vote a provisional ballot and you don't go back within the required amount of time to correct whatever was wrong, they cancel your voter registration. If there are other things such as your ability to, if you get a confirmation in the mail for you've registered to vote and you get a confirmation and you don't respond to it, they can prosecute you. And this has tons of legs and arms that are frightening. And I would like to just say, as a general question, when you couple that with the extreme gerrymandering in Ohio, where do we go as a state? I mean, how do we survive this? And I certainly hope that you will you'll feature all of the provisions of the SAVE Act, not just in your reporting, not just the proof of citizenship, but no drop boxes anywhere, not even at the Board of Elections. I mean, this goes on and on and on. This is horrendous. But what happens to our state?
I think that is a good question, an existential one. As we know, now you have to have a photo ID to vote, and that was to curb voter fraud, which is very, very small percent in this state. We have Frank LaRose, who's our Secretary of State, but we're going to be playing musical chairs next year with all of the Republican office holders because they're all running for a different seat. Laura, do you want to take anything on the SAVE Act? No, but we will keep reporting on it because you're right. The fundamental part of a democracy is the right to vote. Bob wants to respond.
It's okay.
Years ago, I worked in Columbus and dealt a lot with John Huston when he was Secretary of State, and he took office bound and determined to crack down on voter fraud, which was one of the buzzwords for the Republican Party then. And it was for Obama's re-election. He ordered every county board to report every impropriety they came across. Big, small, whatever. We're going to sort these out once and for all. And they got 650 to 700 complaints from various counties, dismissed nearly all of them as just paperwork. They ended up whittling that down to about 30 that they sent to county prosecutors to look into further. They got knocked down to about 6. 6 cases that were worth pursuing out of more than 11 million ballots cast. And after that election, John Huston quit talking about voter fraud. And he would say, we need to make it hard to cheat, but we need to make it easy to vote. So if you hear voter fraud now, it's not to solve a drastic voter fraud issue.
All right, let's try and squeeze in the last one.
Last question.
Okay, one thing that I've gleaned from this whole get-together is that we as citizens need to speak up whenever we can, and that you will then cover what we're doing. And if we're protesting, if we're able to get through to any of our elected officials, which reminds me of trying to call an 800 number and screaming, agent please, into the phone, because they're not getting a human being who's going to respond to you. But the other thing I'd like to see covered is who is coming down the pipeline. Voting is one of the things, say that aside, that we still can do. Who's coming down the pipeline that we can start supporting right now? It's not too early to hear who they are. Who can we support now? Who can we look at now to make sure that we're throwing our votes behind the people who are going to actually represent us and actually do what the people want?
Well, we've got elections, and big ones coming up next year in 2026 for basically all the state positions. We know that Amy Acton is running on the Democratic side. We know that Vivek Ramaswamy is running, and Dave Yost for the governor. So we will continue to cover those. And I agree, speaking up is what you can do in a democracy. So thank you so much for all of your should we squeeze in one more, Chris? Yeah. One more.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I can sort of sum it all up. We have a tripartite government. And it seems to me that this evening, implicit in this evening, is that one branch of government is absent. And our representatives are not showing up so that we can confront them and share our concerns. So we're doing it via the plain dealer, and I thank you for that. Now, take January 6th, for example, and the courts, 61 courts said the election was legitimate, but the president insisted that it was stolen. And a lot of people believe that, so that the courts were rejected. The Congress is absent. The Senate is quiet. So the other day on Meet the Press, the president was asked if about due process for immigrants. He said, well, there's a million of them. That's a hassle, that he has lawyers. So he's questioning the very Constitution. Now, implicit in the tripartite government is a conservative form of government. It is slow. It is deliberately slow. And the president is trying to speed it up, which is not conservative. It's populist. So what do you think is the state of civic education in the United States? The knowledge of civics, both among the people and among our leaders.
Does anyone want to take the knowledge of civics? I mean,
I think teachers are really afraid to teach boldly because there are a lot of people who are watching them who believe that they're trying to sway their children.
Indoctrinate.
Indoctrinate, either conservative or liberal. So yeah, I mean, I think civics education may or may not be good, but I think kind of, to me, one of the bigger problems is, like, I don't feel like enough people engage, read the news. You guys all do. So
Thank you.
But yeah, that's kind of how I see it. People don't know how to critically read and critically think.
The idea that if you're not paying, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for coming tonight. Really appreciate your wonderful questions. So many thoughtful questions, so many ideas that we're going to ruminate on and we're going to take back to our newsroom and we're going to figure out the best way to cover. I want to thank all of our panelists, experts that they are. Round of applause for them. Thank you so much for the knowledge. Thank Chris and Layla on the microphones, Courtney Stolfi, who we didn't get any emailed questions because you guys all had so many wonderful ones. Josh Duke on social, Dave Pekowitz and John Piana on all the technical stuff that made us look good, hopefully. Josh Gunter, who's taking photos. We had our editors here, Mike Norman, Peter Krause, John Caniglia, and Kristen Davis. That's who steers the ship on a regular basis. Mary Frances McGowan's covering the event tonight, her first week on the job. She's probably like, okay, just stepped into this. And Caitlin Durbin is here. She covers the county. So if you want to talk she's here. So thank you so much. Let's keep this conversation going, whether that's with Chris on subtext. We all know that you guys love these texts. When he was on vacation for a week, we got an email that was like, "Where's Chris?"